Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor. Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of the show. Today, bringing another really awesome guest involved in creating a better tomorrow for many people out there. Today, we have the honor of being joined on the show by Dr. Torkil Færø, who is a medical doctor, an author, a documentary filmmaker, as well as a photographer, whose work sits at the very interesting intersection of frontline medicine and practical preventative health. As a clinician who received his medical degree from University of Oslo, Dr. Færø has served as both a general practitioner as well as an emergency room physician. And interesting, back in the mid-1990s, was among the first Norwegian physicians to work with Doctors Without Borders during the Angola Civil War in Angola. He spent over the last 2 decades traveling, not just as a freelance physician all around Norway, but he has been conducting tens of thousands of consultations and had some experiences that really shaped his conviction that many modern diseases are rooted in chronic stress, lifestyle mismatches. His book, The Pulse Cure, became a national bestseller and has now been published internationally. And it's a fascinating book on how ultimately heart rate variability, which is a topic we'll get into, these tiny variations in time between heartbeats, and a variety of wearable technologies can ultimately help, from everything from studying nervous system problems, sleep issues, recovery, inflammation, and other medical ailments. And he combines a variety of really interesting case stories and hands-on protocols, ultimately so readers can help personalize their own routine, whether it's focused on sleep, exercise, relaxation practices. Beyond the book, Dr. Færø translates his ideas to podcasts, these public talks, and other online initiatives. It'll be interesting hearing about his own personal health work on the same front, because he himself has had very measurable results from these technologies and concepts that he's developed. So a lot of really cool themes to get into today. Really looking forward to the discussion. An honor to have him with us. Dr. Torkil Færø, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Thank you, Ira. It's so nice to be here. Looking forward to talk about my passion. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, I would like, to start off, before we get to heart rate variability, just to hear a little bit more about you, because, as I mentioned, in addition to being an emergency room physician, you were really in, let's just say, the most stressful of stressful environments that I guess one could experience, not just being a practicing physician in the field of Doctors Without Borders, but in the middle of a civil war in Angola. I wonder if you could take us back a little bit, because that story by itself is fascinating, but would love to hear about how you dealt with, not just resilience and bouncing back, but the extreme stress at that time that you no doubt found yourself in the field.
Yes, that was very interesting and stressful times in Angola, because suddenly I found myself, being 27 years old in the middle of a war zone. It was in between. It was a ceasefire, but it was still, the days were filled by mine injuries, by explosives, by a population where, in my department, in the children pediatric ward, it was like 3 children dying every day. And I learned the ability to see which child will I not see tomorrow, which is for a, in the developed world, it's something that you almost never see. I don't think I've even seen that in my work in Norway. So it provided me with an insight into the whole other way of the global healthcare, the diseases of poverty. And what I'm talking about usually is the diseases of wealth, the diseases that we find in our situation where we should have excellent health, having all the money. But here we die of inflammation-based diseases from too much stress, too little capacity in our health. So it's interesting to see both of these aspects of healthcare, I would say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one other interesting thing, and then, we'll move a little towards the autonomic nervous system and heart rate variability and all that. But it was interesting, before the Pulse Cure, you published another book, which is quite interesting, called The Camera Cure, where you, in addition to obviously Angola, you are known for traveling quite a bit. I think you reached something like 80 countries, 5 continents, and we're doing rather, impressive travel photography along the way. And you created a very interesting, I guess a companion concept to what we're going to be talking about with the Pulse Cure in this book, The Camera Cure, in the sense that activities, and this is very interesting for our family because we've got a lot of amateur photographers here in this house, but the concept of tools, like it's maybe I call low-hanging fruit, something like photography that may help center somebody, make them more mindful, intentionality. Say a couple words about that as well, because I think it's just another interesting piece of your story, and then we'll move on to the Pulse Cure.
The Camera Cure, unfortunately not translated into English, is a book about how you can use the mental strategies and the principles behind how you do things to succeed by using it at the concrete action of getting a good picture. And the way you're getting a good picture by being in the moment and being decisive and taking action. The same principles you can transfer to anything you want to accomplish in life, whether you want to be a good podcaster or a businessman or artist or whatever you want to do. And I could see that from my patients that they had trouble with their coping skills. They didn't have these principles inside themselves. And then when I tried as a doctor to explain about it, you were kind of meeting a wall of they didn't want to know that or to hear that their situation that they were in, that their way of doing things would contribute to that. So I thought, okay, and I was teaching a lot of workshops, in photography. And in photography, in the workshops, the participants would take notes and try out the things I would suggest, something that they were not doing in my doctor's office. So I thought, okay, this is a way through photography to teach people how to deal with opportunities, how to deal with problems, and to use photography as a way to, picture themselves better, or so I called it, to use pictures as a way to improve their coping skills. Mm. And it was actually through that book that I became aware of that we have the autonomic nervous system at the foundation of our brains. So we have the intellectual part, our prefrontal cortex, which, has made it possible for the two of us to speak, to invent all the technology that we have, writing all the books that we can read. But at the foundation of our brain, we have the autonomic nervous system that we share with all vertebrates, all mammals. And through the Camera Cure, I became aware that this system is involved in so much more than I was taught as a doctor. Mm. So, and that was part of the background that I went on to write the Pulse Cure, which is a book on how we can use and regulate this autonomic nervous system by measuring the heart rate variability. Mm-hmm. Because heart rate variability is a biometric that kind of takes like the temperature on the autonomic nervous system. Mm-hmm. Because the autonomic nervous system, I probably need to explain, is divided in 2 parts. Sure. It's divided in the sympathetic, stressful part, and the parasympathetic, restful part. Mm-hmm. And we need to have some balance between these two. And luck has it that the heart rate will will behave differently whether we are in the restful state or the stressful state. So in the restful state, when we breathe in, the heart rate will speed up a little bit. And when we breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, it will slow down to save some energy now that there's less oxygen in the lungs.
Mm-hmm.
But when we are in this stress state, for whatever reason, whether it's mental stress, maybe we have been eating something we cannot tolerate well. For women, it can be in the week before menstruation. We may have been drinking alcohol, and so many different reasons why would be in this stress state. So then the wearables like the watches and the smart rings that we have, they can keep track of the heart rate and
Mm-hmm.
then can provide us with the answer whether we are having a stress balance that is sustainable or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's just a repeat for the audience, so everyone's. And I know that this is we're going to be doing a foundational course that most college students would have over a couple semesters in human anatomy and physiology. But so we'll put our central nervous system over here for a bit. The brain and the spinal cord, we talk a lot about those on the show. We're focusing on the peripheral nervous system and the miles of nerves that run through our bodies, and there's the stuff that the somatic part, which is the stuff I can do and move around. The autonomic over here, which is where we're talking heartbeat, digestion, breathing, glandular secretions, sexual arousal. So a lot of the things happening behind the scenes that we don't think about. And then you broke it down to sympathetic and parasympathetic and this important balance that we need to have in our life. Let's take that now and go to heart rate variability. And I think this is a very important concept. And just, again, for the audience, and we should talk about this a bit, we are not talking about pulse here. We are not talking about the rate that the heart beats or the time that your heart beats in a minute. We're talking about these very, let's say, microscopic or millisecond based electrical variations from one heartbeat to the next. And I want you to take a little time because these are not measured by, I can't do this and find it out. Electrocardiogram and other technologies really allow us to see it. But talk more, take us into heart rate variability. It's an important concept.
Mm. Yeah, it is this variation that we can see when we are in the restful state. So, and compared to the stressful state, where it will beat at a very steady pace in the stressful state, it's like our organism then regards it as, okay, this organism needs to survive. We cannot relax and then go into the recovery mode until the stress is over. But of course, in our day, for so many people, the stress will not be over. So we are busy all the time and we are doing a lot to our bodies that will keep it in this stressed mode, often without us knowing, because many of the sources of stress that we can see when we start measuring the heart rate and the HRV from our smartwatches, many of the stressors come from surprising sources like the food, like the alcohol, like overtraining, and so on. So this is why I think it's important to be able to measure the heart rate in this way, because our senses, they have been very well developed towards outward threats throughout
Mm-hmm.
time. We have excellent eyesight, excellent hearing, smell, and taste, and so on, sense of touch. Because all the threats throughout history came from the outside. But now the threat to our health and our longevity comes from the inside. Too much stress compared to our capacity and compared to our recovery, our time in the recovery state.
Mm-hmm.
So when we get an overview of this through the insight into the heart rate variability, then we're able to adjust this, because what you can measure, you can manage, right? So
Mm-hmm.
then when we see the results from the wearables, from the apps, we are able to change our lifestyle towards a more sustainable lifestyle. I'm not sure if that was what you were referring to, but
Absolutely.
that is some of my thoughts.
Absolutely. And as you were just saying there, in terms of measuring, and of course, everyone listening to this show, everyone goes to their physicians, and we know what we're told is a good blood pressure, and we know what is told a decent level of cholesterol or glucose or whatever the case may be. What are we looking for? I mean, I know a heart rate variability high is good. Not high is not good, because again, it talks about sort of this resilience, the ability to bounce back and manage stress. What are we talking about? And talk about sort of the spectrum here of what
Mm.
a great heart rate variability is versus not great versus bad.
Mm.
That okay, and in other words, the types of things that a clinician like yourself would say, all right, you got to do a much better job, or you're going
Mm.
to be going in the wrong direction very fast.
Yes, so the heart rate variability is measured in milliseconds, which would be the variation between heartbeats. So that, say that you have 30 milliseconds HRV as an average throughout the night, that would be a typical result that you would get from your watch. That means that there's, 30 milliseconds variation between the heartbeats on an average. And that would be a quite okay number. The higher the number, the better variation between heartbeats, then it would be a better chance for you to have a better health. So statistically speaking, a person with a 60 in heart rate variability should have a better health, objectively seen, than one with a heart rate variability of 30. But it's just, on the average. So there's a 50% genetic component to this. So even one with a 30 milliseconds could have the same objective health level as one with a 60. But on average, the one with the 60 would have a better health. So you want to have a higher number in your heart rate variability as a sign that your machinery, so to speak, is running more smoothly and effectively, has more resilience and more capacity, spare capacity to work and do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
The lower the heart rate variability, the chances are that your body is under constant stress with less available resources for your immune system to do its job, and also for your perceived energy in the moment, that you would, with a low heart rate variability, chances are that you're often tired, you don't have the energy to accomplish what you want to do, and so on. You don't have, you don't have the same ability for empathy towards other people because you're struggling so much yourself. So, for example, a business leader with a higher heart rate variability would have more empathy with their employees, and would take better decisions. For example, the research shows.
And you've described heart rate variability as sort of this early warning system for various illnesses. And I know some of these things can go in sort of a nasty circle. We put sort of diseases for a moment over here. We just look at lifestyle for a moment, and you were mentioning obviously exercise, proper sleep, healthy diet can affect heart rate variability, but at the same time, if heart rate variability is messed up, those things get so it can be a sort of a self-fulfilling problem. What are we? I mean, what are the core drivers when you look at just lifestyle? When you have someone that wants to come to you, maybe they don't have chronic diseases as of yet, but they're in that zone where again, the numbers are starting not to look great. What are sort of the most the top line things that you look at in terms of lifestyle factors, in terms of sleep hygiene, in terms of you know types of exercise, and of course love to hear about diet, because I think I'm one of those people, for example, that I have a every time I accidentally eat something with MSG in it, I get, crazy tachycardia and all sorts of problems. I don't know if that messes with my heart rate variability. I know it messes with my sleep because I don't sleep at night, but take us down the lifestyle path a
Mm.
bit in some of these concepts, if you would.
Yes, absolutely. And in my book, I call it an expedition.
Yeah.
And that is because the different stages of this lifestyle journey that you have in front of you is it will take some struggle to be able to do it. That's why I call it an expedition and not just a journey. And this expedition starts with sleep, because sleep is probably the most important thing you can do to optimize, or rather normalize, I would say. So I usually start with sleep, and you would get a measurement of the quality of your sleep, both, regarding the sleep phases, but also your heart rate variability during sleep, to see that your sleep is restorative, that you are actually
Hmm.
recovering while you are sleeping. For example, because what I used to do, and I've done all the mistakes in my own book, I used to have 2 or 3 glasses of wine before going to bed because I thought it would calm me down,
Yeah.
and so it did, but the sleep was horrible, and that is what I could see when I started measuring it. So so even though I was sleeping 8 hours, it was not restorative because my heart rate variability was very low. I was not recovering. And there are some other advice on sleep. You should try to dim the lights in the evening.
Hmm.
Try to have your bedroom cool, maybe 60 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit. It should be really dark so that you can't see a hand in front of you. So when you start to implement these different strategies for sleep, then you will have more energy to do the other stuff that you may require more willpower and so on
Hmm.
to be able to do, like exercise, like making better choices when it comes to nutrition and so on.
Hmm.
So it starts with sleep, and then maybe I would have a look at your VO2 max level,
Okay.
because that is also something that these watches will give you. And the VO2 max level is a measurement, an estimate of your fitness level. And the VO2 max is what is very much probably the most important metric when it comes to longevity and health level. So it
Okay.
tells you something about your ability to metabolize oxygen and energy in your body. And the better, the more power you have. And so if I can see that your VO2 max is low, then I would start trying to improve that, either by doing some cardio work or endurance activity, or strength work.
Hmm.
And then maybe if that is okay, I may go to the nutrition, because so many people will be, including myself, be very surprised that for many people, the worst stressor will be the different food that you are eating.
Yeah.
Often it's food containing gluten, bakery goods, bread, pasta, pizza, and so on, that will stress your body and stress your immune system, creating inflammation in your body. And of course, we know that one of the major factors behind the inflammation and the lifestyle diseases is our diet, right? If you have a poor diet, uh, your health will be worse. And we can see it in the heart rate variability. So I have actually changed my diet quite a bit away from bakery goods. I don't hardly eat bread anymore, and hardly any pizza. I can also see that if I eat something with chili in it, that would stress me quite a lot, and
Hmm.
also can destroy my sleep for hours
Hmm.
afterwards. And then also I would have a look at stress management. So if you have a stressful life and you may be easily, stressed by emotional issues, at work or in your family, then you would really need some way to be able to calm yourself down, so
Hmm.
that you are in control of your mental stress, so to speak. And that you could do by doing meditation or breath work, or even cold water therapy. To
Hmm.
take a cold shower actually could work well. So that would be some of the information that I would look at when people come to me with their graphs and numbers from their watches.
Hmm. And you also talk about sleep, but you also emphasize rest. and sort of these rest and recovery experiments. Could you say a few words about that too? Because again, sleep and rest slightly different,
Hmm.
and take us down that path a
Yeah,
bit, if you would.
yeah, absolutely. And first, I must say that the problem is not necessarily that we are stressing too hard, but that
Mhm.
we are recovering too little. When we
Okay.
put these kind of smartwatches and activity bands on hunter-gatherers that still exist today,
Hmm.
um, then we can see that they will be active for like 3 or 4 hours a day, and
Hmm.
then they will be resting. And that is the rhythm of life that our physiology is, perfected towards that balance.
Hmm.
So, of course, in our time, there's so many opportunities to be doing stuff all the time. So it actually would take some effort to find the time and calm yourself totally down. And one of the good things about these smartwatches and smart rings is I can tell you when you are actually calm. Not when you think you are calm, like I used to do,
Hmm.
but you can see that there's even a level kind of below that you can reach if you are doing, slow breathing or meditation or taking time, listening to maybe binaural sounds or music that you love or even reading. So many people find that reading relaxes them quite a bit.
Hmm.
Or listening to podcasts also uh, can be restful.
Right.
And when you can see that on your monitor that you actually are in the parasympathetic mode, then it's so much easier to balance this. But you should have some way of managing to get into that restful mode that you could verify with your heart rate variability that you are actually in this restful mode.
Mhm. You know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking again, going back to this principle of the early warning system and sort of this barometer. There's many illnesses again that disruption in heart rate variability ultimately can lead to or amplify, but then again, illnesses that affect heart rate variability, whether it's arrhythmias or certain neurological disorders and psychiatric disorders and so forth. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit of that because, obviously, I guess in the traditional
Mm.
medical sphere, we have obviously there's medications. I mean, and beta blockers come to mind, right? Of things that potentially affect heart rate variability, and then there's all the drugs out there that can cause QT prolongation and all that. I spent a little time in that area a couple careers ago, but talk a little bit about this because it seems like there may be sort of traditional medicines that may be useful, let's say, in some of these cases, but others that may amplify indirectly this problem. So, again, with your clinical hat on, how do you think about not just the diseases, but sort of the pharmacotherapeutic things that are out there that, yeah, you also have to think about what they're doing with HRV.
Mm. Yes, that's a very important and good question because I can see that so many medications are affecting the heart rate variability and the stress levels. And you're mentioning beta blockers, and I think that could actually, for many people, be quite good because that would block part of the adrenaline signal. So if you're too often filled with adrenaline, I think it can calm you down so that it's easier to reach this restful mode.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's not so much used in that way. It's mainly to lower the blood pressure. But my theory, when I see people using it and hearing that they feel calmer, also, I think it can be used more than it is for that reason. On the other hand, the parasympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system is mediated by the vagus nerve.
Okay.
And we have a lot of anticholinergic medicines, and
Yep.
they disturb the neurotransmitter of the vagus nerve. So many medications against, the gastric ulcers and or tumous acid in the stomach and so on, and so many medications against mental illnesses, um, and will be working against the vagus nerve. For example, in Norway, 1 million out of 5 million inhabitants use this kind of medicine that disturbs the parasympathetic, most important nerve. And often, if you see the side effects of these medicines, it will be like tachycardia, it will be, that they become anxious, they will have palpitations, and so on. Tachycardia, that would mean a high heart rate. And a dry mouth and these kind of things, sleep disturbances. So if you look at your side effect of your medication and see that these are the kind of side effects, chances are that this is an anticholinergic side effect to your medicine. And when we get this insight into the side effect, because often you wouldn't necessarily feel it yourself, but you can see it on the heart rate.
Right.
Often people tell me that, okay, they went, on a holiday, forgot their medicine, and whoops, the heart rate, HRV improved, just by doing that. So I really think it's important to look at the medications that people use and check the heart rate variability.
Yeah, you had me thinking back because I was a child of the 1960s and 1970s, and thinking back to sort of the first generation, antihistamines that that were both anticholinergic and histamine, and they used to really throw you for. I remember I remember those, but yeah, that's a very interesting point about the anticholinergic drugs, and it's interesting to see how many people still use them sort of for daily health. But no, that's interesting just to think about. Look, one of the topics that has been very let's say hot for us the last couple of years has been this whole area, and you mentioned longevity, and whether we want to call it longevity or anti-aging or health span or whatever the case may be, but it seems like a lot of folks in that particular segment are always looking for metrics, right? And whether that's blood levels of certain biomarkers, or these newer sort of epigenetic tests, or whatever the thing is out there. A lot of it seems to be coming back that it's hard to interpret a lot of this data, but heart rate variability, it seems, is a kind of a unifying biomarker, let's say, for based on all the things that it touches on. And what you could talk a little bit about that, because again, longevity by becoming very popular, but ultimately how we measure properly and what a proper sort of outcome is that we can measure. And talk about that a bit, because I know this is important in the book as well.
Yeah, so I think that heart rate is it's like the speedometer of the intensity of our bodies. And it's no surprise. It's what I do at the ER, at the emergency room, when people come in. I check their heart rate. I check their oxygen level, check the temperature. All of these metrics is what you get through the smartwatches and rings. And when it comes to longevity, also that HRV is connected to having a longer life and risk of death. So I think that, and the good thing is also that the HRV is something that you can check and you have control of literally in your own hands, while many of the other blood markers that you're talking about, the telomeres and so on, the measurement of this would require you to send a blood test into a lab and get it back. And often the results are not so easily interpretable and actionable. But the heart rate variability is much more actionable. You will see the results in real time. I know, for example, just today, I'm at a fasting mimicking diet retreat. And from experience, I know that when I'm fasting like this, then my stress level is way low. So that my body doesn't have to work on digesting food and checking out the different food that I put in from the immune system, because 70% of the immune system is organized around the intestines, right? So, so
Mm-hmm.
that you are putting them to rest. And then I know that this is a restful day. Well, yesterday I had two lectures, was traveling, I was eating, I was given food that I know will stress me that contained chili, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now I know that I can relax today and make up for that, you know? So it's an actionable day-to-day result. And if you are able to keep your heart rate variability at a good range over time, meaning that your immune system is able to do its job, also makes it possible to combat the different kind of, you know, cancers, heart disease, dementia, Parkinson, which if you Google it, you will see that more or less all of these diseases have a connection to heart rate variability,
Mm-hmm.
including death of all causes.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why I think that it's probably the most important biometric for longevity. Not only that it's a good it's a good biometric in itself, but more importantly that you have control of it at the daily real time, you know, insight into it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As we're on this topic of aging, and again, thinking of sort of the elders that were in my life, some were proactive. My father-in-law had his ring and had his wearables and all that stuff, but other members did not. Clearly, the widespread use of wearables extremely important in sort of how the healthcare system is evolving. Going to be very important, as you're pointing out, with heart rate variability, and not just capturing this data, but allowing our clinicians to interpret the results. What about for those that aren't? I mean, and we obviously we're in a tech world, but still, we got here in the United States, we have something like 120 million or so people, 60 plus, that may not be up to date or care about wearing all the new high tech products and so forth. Um, Thoughts about that and sort of the whole age
Mm-hmm.
tech segment of what you would
Mm-hmm.
like to see if there's tools that maybe we don't have
Mm-hmm.
yet that you would like to see developed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so if you mean that, okay, we have a lot of older people that may not be as familiar with the technology,
Yeah.
and you don't really need that.
Okay.
But you need to do the things that the ones who use the technology has found out works. So my editor was very particular about that you didn't need a pulse measuring device to make use of the information in the book. Probably because she was not using it.
Right.
So, but you would need maybe to know that the ones who use the heart rate monitors find out that stopping eating like 3 or 4 hours before you go to bed seems to improve your sleep for so many people. So
Mhm.
then you can do that even if you don't have the measurement to verify that it actually works for you. So and quitting alcohol and all these different things that people do once they track their heart rate. I would say almost everybody I've heard of will minimize alcohol and they will stop eating earlier before they go to bed. So that is almost common among anyone that starts
Mhm.
using it.
Mhm.
And just being outside, making sure that you're sleeping according to a good circadian rhythm. Being outside with the sunlight, super important. That's one of the
Mhm.
most powerful things to raise your heart rate variability. When people go from, and particularly in Norway, when they, you know, Norway is at the same latitude as Alaska, right?
Right.
So when we seek the sun in the winter, that probably that many people do, you know, it's complete darkness, you know, 24 hours at the time in the very north of the country where I often work. And they would like to go for a week or two down to the south of Spain, to the Canary Islands, and so on. And then their heart rate variability doubles. And I don't think I've seen anything else that can double the heart rate variability as reliable and effectively as sunlight.
Mm.
So that is something, of course, you can do even if you don't have a wearable, just knowing that being outside in the sun is healthy for you.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, the whole area of of chronobiology and cycles of that nature is fascinating, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I mean, clearly, and again, you've taken us through your own journey here in terms of you got rid of the several glasses of wine and no bread, and you're doing the fasting and time restricted eating and all that. Clearly, major impact to your patterns. Any specific patient stories that you could relay to us that where that maybe something shocking in terms of the positive benefit that you've seen in some of your patients as you've brought this important biometric to the fore as part of your
Mm.
clinical experience that you could share with us today.
Mm. Yeah, it's actually one. I had a patient, it was just this Christmas, and she was overweight, she was stressed, she had acquired a number of chronic diseases, and I had to transfer her or to the hospital the day after, made a deal with the
Mm-hmm.
hospital the day after. And as she is waiting for the doctor at the hospital, she sees me on the screen because I'm on national TV
Mm-hmm.
talking about the power of rest and the power of using the heart rate and so on. And she sees that, she decides, wow, that was a doctor from yesterday. And she bought my books, lost by using the strategies in the book, she has lost like 80 pounds. She has improved all of the biometrics that her doctors at the hospital see
Mm-hmm.
and measure, and they kind of are curious about what are you doing
Mm-hmm.
to improve this fast because they're not used to patients getting better in this way.
Mm-hmm.
So so she has more or less used all of the different actions in the pulse cure and starts exercising and eating better and getting rid of the symptoms and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So so that is one that comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
I'm flooded by them on social media or more or less every day.
Imagine.
So in Norway, you see, in Norway, this has been just this insane bestseller. It's actually been sold to 1% of the population, which would in the US numbers would be like 3 million books, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of suddenly going from being just a normal doctor in my office all by myself to being this kind of a public figure talking about preventative medicine and how you can take charge of your health, because
Mm-hmm.
that is maybe also something that's really, really important about this, because I know that the healthcare system in the US, just like everywhere else,
Yeah.
has this strategy of waiting until you get sick and then we do something, and that is very expensive, not very efficient. So what the Pulse Cure is about is taking charge of your health, minimizing your risk. You know, you can't take the risk away, but you can do what is in your power to minimize the risk of contracting all these lifestyle diseases. That is 80% of the diseases that we are treating. So and the healthcare system seems to be slow in this change. We cannot
Right.
wait for the healthcare system to move around. But we can take charge, immediately, like this woman did, right? Just changing her total lifestyle within such a short period of time. And it's all accessible to everyone because all the advice, more or less all the advice in the Pulse Cure and what it takes to be healthy is free.
Mm-hmm.
It costs nothing to relax. It
Right.
costs nothing to sleep better. It is cheaper to drink water instead of alcohol or these sodas and so on. Fasting, of course, is obviously cheaper than the alternative. Doing cold therapy, breath work, being out in the sunshine, sleeping at night, turning the lights off. Yeah, it's all available, easily accessible, and cheap or free. But that is also the problem because you cannot monetize on that. So there's no commercial pressure behind that,
Mm-hmm.
which means that the focus of the healthcare industry that I'm also a part of, as a doctor, I get my livelihood mainly from treating sick people, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that is
Mm-hmm.
how all of us in the healthcare industry makes money. from sick people.
Mhm.
I think the amount spent on preventative medicine in Norway is like 3% or so of the total health budget, and that is not sustainable. It's with all the lifestyle diseases that we see now, this just seems to getting worse by the day.
Mhm.
It is not possible to the whole healthcare system seems to be crashing. At least in Norway, it's probably the same in the US as well.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, major
Yeah.
problems. A lot of politics, of course, now involved in it, but yeah, it's refreshing again listening to what you're talking about, and again some of the simple adjustments that we could all
Mm.
make, and that's why I so appreciated a lot of the aspects of your book and what you're espousing. So very impressive. What else should we be on the lookout for in terms of you with new initiatives
Mhm.
coming up as we get towards
Mhm.
the end of 2025 into 2026? I mean, I know we mentioned the Camry Cure and the Post Cure. Is there a third book, the Rest Cure, that it was being published,
Mhm.
or is that related?
Yeah.
And take us down that
Yeah,
path.
yeah. That is published, which is kind of looking at the rest part of
Right,
the chapter of the pulse cure with
right.
more, there's a broader look at that. But what I'm writing at the moment is the sun cure,
Ah,
which is a deep dive into the different biological effects from sunlight. Because of
mhm,
course, seeing the numbers on the pulse and hearing people's stories of how going towards the sun and being in the sun relieves some of symptoms and so on just
mhm,
spurred my curiosity into that. And it seems to be that it's a very underappreciated um, medicine, actually.
yeah,
So with lots of the sunlight, the energy from the sun, in essence, we are solar panels. Our
mhm,
cells are taking in the energy and the different frequencies and wavelengths from the sun and using it. Of course, we
right.
are developed as cells and as human beings, and before that, as pre-hominids or whatever you call it, under the sun. We come from Africa. We come from like Kenya and Ethiopia,
Yeah.
before we wandered into Europe. So we are a species evolved under the sun, and I think that has been, you know, it's hard to understand how we became scared of the sun. The
Uh,
sun doesn't seem to be so dangerous when it comes to melanoma as we have been taught. So I think that is actually some of the future of medicine, even if it's a very, very simple solution, actually.
yeah.
So other than that, I think that the artificial intelligence compared with the results from the wearables, maybe it could include also blood glucose metering. Because I know many people, can take screenshots of what they see on their wearables, put it into ChatGPT, ask for some advice on how to make, a program for a diet or exercise or whatever, and they get excellent results back and
Mhm.
advice. So I think maybe it would be a problem for us doctors, that we become obsolete, at least for the people who take charge of their own health. Of course, there will be enough things to do from
Yeah,
all the people who don't do that. So I'm not worried in that sense. But
right.
but at least artificial intelligence and the way that we can monitor ourselves um, has extreme possibilities for the future.
Yeah, I appreciate AI and ChatGPT and all this stuff. I like seeing I like seeing an organic doctor at the end of the day. I just feel calmer because I
Mm.
know going into those systems, can raise your blood pressure and make you think you have everything under the sun. But no,
Mm.
but no, I applaud what you're doing. I think all of these angles of looking at simple solutions that again, the, the sun has been here a pretty long time. The parasympathetic nervous system has been around for quite a long time, and thinking about ways to modulate and the connection to health and wellness and longevity is fascinating. So I applaud you and everything you're doing. Again, for everybody out there that's going to be listening to this episode of the show across the various podcast networks or watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Dr. Torkil Færø. Pick up a copy of The Pulse Cure, Balance Stress, Optimize Health, and Live Longer, available at all major booksellers, and also be on the lookout for The Sun Cure. Of course, check out The Camera Cure. But Torkil, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your break there to talk to us for a little while today. Thank you for everything you're up to. And as we like to say on our show, thank you for spreading the message here of these really interesting approaches to health, wellness, longevity, and helping to create a better tomorrow for millions of people out there. Really, really great story.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It was really great having you.